This is a $1,000 film camera. And this is a $1 film camera. In this video, I want to show you what kind of film camera you can expect to get at drastically different price points and what makes them worth it or not. Before we get to the pinnacle, let's start at the bottom. This is the Xr308 telephoto by Keystone. And how was I able to only pay $1 for this camera? Well, this one doesn't work. And also, it reeks. Next up, the 35mm reusable film photo camera. This is actually the only camera on our list today that you can buy new in stores. It is entirely made of plastic, and the lens is about as sharp as a butter knife. Let me show you. We've got my volunteer here behind the camera. Say hi, Hannah. Say happy Halloween, Hannah.
Happy Halloween.
She's volunteered to take a picture with me today. This camera has a single shutter speed and only one button, the shutter release. Let's put it to use. Give us a smile. Oh, you are so gorgeous. So this camera is as bare bones as it gets. And while you can actually take a picture with this camera, I wouldn't exactly call it a pleasing experience. For all of this glorious plastic camera, you can expect to pay only $5, new. Now onto a real 35mm film camera. This is the Nikon N90S. This camera has a maximum shutter speed of an 8,000th of a second, flash sync speed of a 2/50th of a second, and if these numbers mean nothing to you, don't worry, we'll get to it. It has 4 automatic exposure modes, a continuous drive mode that lets you take 4.3 pictures per second, and the cherry on top, cutting edge autofocus. You hear how silent that is? All of this allows you to take high octane images of high speed situations like this one. Dad! God, what the fuck is he doing? Dad, come on! I've never wasted so much film so fast. That was 4 pictures. I wonder if it was actually 4.3 frames per second. The N90S's advanced technology, versatility, and ergonomic design bring it to a total modern day cost of $50. Shocking, right? To understand why a camera with such sought after features could only be worth $50, we have to go over what determines a film camera's value. There are so many qualities that give a film camera its value that we can't really name them all, but here are some of the important ones. Starting with the obvious, the specs. What is the camera actually capable of? This is your shutter speed, your flash sync speed, your exposure modes, stuff like that. Next on the list is build quality. Is it made of metal or plastic? Is it fully mechanical or does it rely a lot on electronics? Considering most of these cameras are 20 plus years old, build quality is very important. Now the rest of this list after specs and build are things that have nothing to do with the capabilities of the camera, but instead are things like brand name, rarity, and lastly, hype. This is when the legends of film photography history use a camera like Gary Winogrand or Kendall Jenner. And this could make the camera a little more desirable. Depending on the camera, each of these things can hold a different amount of weight when it comes to pricing. So for example, a huge factor that's holding the N90S back is its fully electronic build. Fully electronic means lots of moving parts. Lots of moving parts means over the 25 years this camera has been in existence, lots of things could go wrong. So despite its advanced features or specs, it's the build quality that gives the N90S such a reasonable price of $50. So now that we've covered how a film camera's value is even determined, let's look at our next tier up. The Canon Ae-1. before we get to our next camera, please listen to a word from our sponsor. I have a sponsor. Do you see this chair? I bought this chair at Goodwill for $9. Do you see what happens when I sit in this chair? I nearly fall to the ground. That's what happens. These old chairs are unergonomic and are turning me into the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Now look at this chair. Does this look unergonomic to you? It's not. It's very ergonomic. And this piece of junk is going in the dumpster. This is FlexiSpot's C7 chair. Look what happens when you lean back. Oh yeah, that's sturdy. That's reliable. Dad, try to lean back.
Oh yeah, that's sturdy. That's reliable.
Not only is it reliable, but it's unbelievably versatile. First off, you've got office mode. The C7 backrest locks at an optimal 93 degrees, providing a stable and upright posture for work. Not to mention the headrest can be tilted to the ideal angle for working, and the seat depth and tilt can be adjusted too. And when you're through with all your hard work and you want to kick your feet up, that's right, footrest. Look how versatile. The C7 comes with a choice between foam and mesh. In my case, I went with the mesh, which is made with a DuPont elastomer and velvet yarn. I know exactly what that means. It provides high elasticity, strong support, breathability, and is eco-friendly. Ideal for summer and those who sweat easily. And down here in Florida, that does not go unnoticed. Use my exclusive code C730. Purchase now for $30 off your own C7. The time to buy is now. It won't get any better than this. The Canon Ae-1 has a maximum shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second, a flash sync speed of a 60th of a second, an automatic shutter priority mode, no automatic winding, and no autofocus. So compared to the N90S, the specs aren't that impressive. What's key about the Ae-1 is its appeal to beginner photographers. The shutter priority mode gives you a corresponding aperture to the shutter speed that you pick, allowing you to focus more on the composition and less on the exposure settings. Manual wind. Beautiful. Let's talk about the downsides. You're unfortunately stuck at 1/1000th of a second maximum shutter speed, which is 3 stops slower compared to the N90S. That means in broad daylight, you're not going to get a nice blurry background. Come on, smile. Are you happy? Editor Max here. I know that the background looks a little blurry, but if you wait till later in the video, you'll see what real bokeh-liciousness looks like. Another downside is the Ae-1's reliance on battery. Without a battery, you will not be able to take a single photo, much like the last camera, the N90S. So what else contributes to the Canon Ae-1's value? Well, it's not exactly rare. Canon produced 5.7 million of these during its lifespan. The build quality of the Canon Ae-1 is good despite its reliance on a battery, but every other camera manufacturer made a camera just like it with the same specs, sometimes with even more capabilities. Like Hannah's favorite camera,
the Nikon FG.
So, taking all of this into account, plus a little recent social media hype, the Canon Ae-1 will run you about $100. Next up, the Nikon FM2. And I know what you're thinking. That looks just like the Ae-1, but this camera has some key differences. This camera is fully mechanical. The only thing you need a battery for is the internal light meter. This camera has a max shutter speed of a 4,000th of a second, a max flash sync speed of a 2/50th of a second, and no automatic exposure modes. Now's a good time to talk about what flash sync speed even is. And if you're one of those natural light photographers, you might want to pay attention so you could learn yourself something. A camera's flash sync speed is the maximum shutter speed the camera can use while shooting flash without the curtain interfering with the image. So a faster shutter sync speed gives you more control over the ambient light. Let me show you. I'll bring a lovely volunteer over here. This never gets old. Okay, I'll take a shot at 2/50th of a second, which is the maximum flash sync speed of the FM2, and then show you what happens when I switch it to 60th of a second, which is the maximum flash sync speed of the Ae-1. Okay, take a step this way, and this way. There we go. Right this way. Yeah, actually work it. Ready? And okay. And now we'll do 2 stops brighter. Good. All right, thank you. You can leave now. This setting may go completely unnoticed to most photographers, but is an absolute deal breaker for photographers that want to control the light in their images. Also, the fast maximum shutter speed of a 4,000th of a second allows you to open up the aperture 2 stops wider than the Canon Ae-1 to get that nice blurry background. You think people are going to get bored of seeing you? Beautiful. Watch your step here.
Oh my God.
All of this, plus the Nikon FM2's bulletproof mechanical build, brings this camera to a grand total of around $250. So we've seen 5 different film cameras at 5 drastically different price points. Now let's move on to the Mac Daddy, the Leica M3. The Leica M3 was made from 1954 to 1967, and still, 60 years later, is drawing a hefty price. This camera is different than the other cameras on this list because it uses a rangefinder focusing system. You don't actually look through the lens, you use a focusing patch within the viewfinder. This has its pros and cons. A lot of street photographers would say this is a superior system, but that's up for debate. All mechanical with no electronics, this camera has a maximum shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second and a maximum flash sync speed of 1/50th of a second. Wait a second, aren't those the exact same specs as the $100 Canon Ae-1? Yeah, so what makes this camera 10 times more expensive? Does it actually take better photos? No, not at all. This camera's value is derived largely because of its build quality and almost certainly not its specs, because those aren't that impressive. For $1,000, you'll still have all the drawbacks of being stuck at a maximum shutter speed of 1/1000th of a second. You'll have none of the advanced capabilities of a cheap SLR like the $50 Nikon N90S. And even the fully mechanical Nikon FM2 has a built-in light meter. Smile. What you do buy into is the trust in the brand name Leica and the well-deserved adoration of their top-notch build quality. So what did we learn? Well, paying more is certainly not going to give you a more capable camera, and it's definitely not going to make you a better photographer. Cameras are not one size fits all, and different people have different reasons for buying the cameras that they do. As long as you know that paying $1,000 for a film camera is not going to make you a more talented photographer, you can make an informed and logical decision about purchasing any camera. So given all this info, what camera would you buy?